You wake to the smell of wet clay and the low chant of men already at work. The sun hasn't risen over Memphis yet, but in the Nile marshes just beyond the reed walls of your hut, the mud is already warm. The river gods don't wait for permission. Neither does the overseer. You're a brickmaker in the late 18th dynasty, around 1300 BCE, just another faceless worker along the sun-baked floodplain of Egypt's lower kingdom. No name inscribed on limestone, no prayer offered in marble, just another back bent in the Nile's shallow edges. The day begins before daylight. Your knees sink into the moist soil as you kneel and scoop by hand, mixing silt and straw to form. Bricks. These are not for your house, you don't own one. They're for the temples, granaries, and tombs of men whose names the gods supposedly recognize. You work in a group overseen by a foreman sent from the estate of a nobleman. He carries a stick, not a symbolic one. He counts beats instead of bricks, and if your rhythm falters, he knows where to land the lash. By the time the ibis flocks circle overhead and the reeds glisten gold, you've shaped your first 100. Bricks of the day. You press each one into a simple wooden mold, sometimes broken at the corners, and lay them out in the sun to dry. The straw keeps them from cracking, but it also slices at your hands. There are no gloves, just calluses. Your duel. Fingernails are dark with clay, and your skin burns even in the morning. The linen around your waist stays damp all day, collecting mud and sweat. You don't look up at the horizon, because the horizon doesn't belong to you. It belongs to those whose names are written down. But if you did look, you'd see the faint outline of pyramids in the distance. Old ones. By your time, they're already ancient. The labor itself isn't what breaks you, it's the routine, the sameness. You work until you cannot stand, and then work more. The work never changes, only the seasons. During inundation, the annual Nile flooding, you shift to other tasks, reinforcing dikes or shaping stone. But the labor is always the same in structure. Your body bends to the will of a land that feeds you but never frees you. By midday, the sun becomes a torment. There is little shade, except for the narrow awnings that the wealthier work crews erect for their supervisors. You chew on bitter herbs to keep your mouth moist. The air smells like wet dirt and sweat, but also the faint sweetness of dung fired. Kilns where the bricks will be hardened later. You're told your work is sacred, part of the eternal order, the mayat that binds society. But when your back aches and your hands bleed, the divine order feels more like a clever illusion. 1 brick, 2 bricks, 1,000 bricks. You are building something eternal, they say. But you wonder what happens to those who only build and are never remembered. At dusk, the last of the bricks are turned. The overseer records the output on a scrap of pottery, an ostrakon, scratched with reed pen and carbon ink. Your name isn't listed. Just a tally of bricks, just a number. You are not a slave, technically. You are a state laborer. But freedom is meaningless when each day folds into the next like layers of mud. Still, you return home. You eat coarse, bread baked with pebbles still inside, and drink half-spoiled beer stored in open clay jars. You sleep next to your children on a mat of woven reeds, your body twitching from exhaustion. There are no records of your thoughts, no monuments in your name, just dried bricks, sun-baked and silent, buried under newer bricks and newer ones still. And so you ask, how many forgotten hands built the very gods they were told to worship? You rise again, though your body begs you not to. The air is still, heavy with heat that hasn't arrived yet, but is waiting just beyond the horizon. Your legs ache, not from yesterday alone, but from every day before that. Pain has become something you wear, like your linen kilt. It's no longer new or sharp, it's dull and familiar. Today is census day. The scribe has come. Not for you exactly, but for your work. He wears a white linen robe, crisp and clean. His feet do not touch the mud, not really. He stands on a small platform of palm planks brought in by the same men he doesn't speak to. He carries a wooden palette of black and red ink and a bundle of reed pens tucked behind his ear like a farmer's knife. You watch him from the edge of the work site, your hands already submerged in the silt. He doesn't look your way. Instead, he watches the bricks, the rows and the stacking, the count and the shape. He writes down what he sees, but what happens next is what tightens your stomach. The tally from yesterday is incorrect. The scribe counts fewer bricks than were promised, whether they cracked in the sun, or were stolen, or simply weren't there. To begin with, it doesn't matter. The number is short. The quota was not met. The overseer begins shouting, not at the scribe, but at your crew. The punishment is not symbolic. There are no ceremonial scoldings or warnings. Instead, you and 3. Others are dragged toward the kilns, not into them but beside them, where the ash from old firings leaves the air thick and choking. Here the lash is legal. It's not a punishment for crime, it's discipline, embedded into the bones of Egyptian labor law. The foreman has a stick, bound with cords. It's meant to bruise, not break, that's what they say anyway. But sometimes bones do break, the others are struck. You are not this time, but you still watch. It isn't about justice, it's about order. The Ma'at, that concept whispered by temple priests, demands balance. If one worker slows, another suffers. If the mud spoils, someone pays. This balance doesn't concern itself with mercy, just mathematics. Later, when the scribe has gone, the overseer returns to walking the rows, inspecting each brick like he's memorizing their shape. You wonder if he remembers your face. Probably not. And yet, you remember his. He wears the same cloth around his forehead every day, now stained with years of sweat. His right eye twitches when he's angry, a little muscle near the brow. You've counted its rhythm like a drumbeat in battle. But the battle isn't fought with spears. It's fought with your spine. After the noon meal, if you can call it that, you are pulled aside to carry bricks from the drying field to the stacking area. This is harder than making them. You lift them in pairs, rough edges scraping at your arms, stacking them onto reed mats tied together with palm rope. Then you haul them in teams, grunting in unison like oxen. You hear talk of new temple construction. A distant pharaoh, Amenhotep or Thutmose or maybe someone else, has decreed another sanctuary be built. You don't know where, it hardly matters. You'll never see it. You'll only shape the material, and maybe, if you're lucky, one of your bricks will have a fingerprint pressed into it, a mistake. A personal trace buried under plaster, a whisper from the hand that made it. At sunset, the fires of the kilns are lit. A rare breeze carries the smell back toward the marshes, where it mixes with the scent of wild onions and sweat. You sit with your workmates on overturned pots. You don't speak much, there's not much to say. Words weigh as much as bricks. But someone laughs, a quiet joke. The kind of laugh that doesn't reach the eyes but is offered anyway. Because what else is there to do? A boy from a neighboring crew approaches with water in a cracked jar. You drink, hands shaking slightly from the fatigue. The water is lukewarm, but it feels like a gift, and then you return to your mat for sleep. Tonight you lie awake a little longer, not because of fear or hunger, but because the scribe wrote something in red ink today. Red ink is for errors. Red ink is for warnings. You wonder whose name or number was next to it, and you wonder if a brick cracks in the sun and no one sees it, does the man who made it still bleed? The Nile floods again, not with rage or violence, just with quiet, steady inevitability. The river has done this for thousands of years, long before your hands first touched clay, long before the temples and kings and tally marks. The black earth swells, the fields vanish, and with them the bricks. You are reassigned during inundation. No more brick making for now. The kilns are underwater, and the mud is too soft to mold. So you are sent inland, past the workers' quarters, and toward the edge of the nobleman's estate. Your task is simpler but no lighter. Move rocks, real ones. From a broken wall that's been half swallowed by the river's appetite, you lift and carry, and lift again. It's the same weight in a different shape, the same ache, only now in different muscles. You are reminded again that you do not belong to yourself. Your family does not speak of dreams anymore. Your son, barely 7, has begun learning to press molds. Your wife wakes early to barter woven mats in the workers' market. She sells them, cheap. Everything is cheap here except time. That's always expensive, and it never gives change. The priests come occasionally to bless the flooded fields. They say a prayer over the water and pour beer into the current. You wonder if the gods notice, if they see the mud-streaked backs and sunken eyes of those who feed their altars from below. You once heard a priest say that to serve Pharaoh is to touch eternity, but your eternity is short, measured in the brittle bones of knees and the fading strength of hands. You touch only what you carry. You reach only as far as the next brick. One morning, the overseer is missing. The crew whispers he was reassigned, or dismissed, or died of heat sickness. No one knows. A new one arrives. He is younger, stricter, his stick is longer. You try not to notice the difference, but there is one. He inspects every mold before it's laid in the sun. He begins marking bad bricks with charcoal lines, a black slash across the top, meaning they'll be discarded, not used, wasted. You feel it personally, like a brand across your own work. He doesn't speak much, he just tallies. One day he brings a scribe with him. A different one, this one younger still. His ink is fresher, his records are neater. He writes on papyrus now, not pottery shards. You wonder if that means the tally will last longer. If your name, or at least your number, will be kept a little more permanently, but you never find out, because the sickness comes. It starts with coughing, then fever, then the shaking, and one by one, the brickmakers fall. No one declares it a plague. But you've heard stories, you've heard what happens when the priests stop coming, when the temples close their doors to the unclean. You do not get a burial. When you die, it is in the marsh where you worked. Your body is wrapped hastily in palm fronds and set beside others. No embalming, no ceremony, just a shallow grave where the bricks once dried. There is no name etched above your resting place, only cracked clay, only silence. But the bricks you shaped, they remain. They are stacked in the foundation of a temple you never saw. A temple for a god who never touched your skin, and a pharaoh who never saw your face. and when visitors come centuries later, they will marvel at the architecture. They will ask about the king who built it. They will read hieroglyphs about gods and glories and wars, but they will not ask who made the bricks. They never do, and so you vanish. Like a thumbprint in wet mud, pressed once, then forgotten. Still there is this. If every god's house was built by hands like yours, then maybe the gods live in the silence between your fingerprints. The gods are always hungry. That is what you're told when you first begin work in the kitchens of Karnak. Not the kind of hunger you know, the gnawing emptiness in your belly, but a sacred hunger, one that demands offerings every morning, every afternoon, and every evening. And so your job is to feed them, or at least pretend to. You are a kitchen, worker in the temple precinct of Amun-Ra around 1250 BCE. The New Kingdom is at its height. Karnak is a city of stone and sound and shadow, a place where priests walk in clean linen and perfume, and where the gods are offered mountains of food, only to have that food end up in the bellies of the priesthood. You do not question this, not because you believe in it, but because you are too tired to care. Your day begins well before the first light of dawn. The great courtyard is still dark, the air heavy with the scent of last night's coals and the faint tang of beer spill on sandstone. You walk barefoot past sleeping dogs and discarded palm baskets toward the open hearths of the lower kitchen courtyard. The fires are already burning. A boy from the wood crew arrived hours before, carrying bundles of sycamore and tamarisk branches to fuel the clay ovens. These aren't fires for warmth. They are for bread, so much bread. The first thing you learn here is that the gods demand bread at every offering. Triangular loaves shaped like pyramids, tall conical loaves baked in standing jars, and flat, hard cakes smeared with honey and herbs. You knead the dough with your elbows, pressing into the clay-mixed flour while sweat drips from your brow. No salt. That would offend the gods. Your arms ache by the third batch. You do not stop. You cannot. Behind you, others are gutting fish, splitting leeks, dicing garlic, and grinding coriander seeds with flat stones. The scent is overwhelming. Not delicious, but dense. Hot air and onion skins and sour beer slosh from jars being used to wash the pots. No metal tools here, just clay and fire and muscle. A priest passes through the kitchen cloisters. You do not look at him. He walks like his feet do not touch the ground. His voice is low, but his words matter more than yours ever will. He reads from a scroll, checking that the food being prepared matches the calendar's requirements. Certain gods demand certain things. Amun wants goose today. Mut requires dates, honeyed. Montu, the war god, will accept beer and onions, but only if the leeks are fresh. The goose is already hanging upside down by its feet. You don't ask where it came from. You don't ask why the gods need birds. You just pluck it. The feathers are oily. They cling to your fingers. You spit one out, unnoticed. A boy, maybe 10 years old, is handed the task of singeing the body over the fire. He's been burned before. His hands are pink with past mistakes, but he works fast. The priest watches. Later, the meat will be carved, arranged neatly with cucumbers, barley cakes, and figs, all placed in woven baskets lined with clean cloth. Not clean because of holiness. Clean because rot attracts flies. Flies offend the gods. The priest blesses the offering. He says the food is for the gods. But after the ceremony, the same food will be carried back through the kitchens to the secondary tables. That's when you eat, not first, not even second, but last. You take what's left, the broken loaf, the gooseneck, the crusty bits of fig scraped from the basket. You eat it while squatting in the shade beside a dripping amphora. There's no joy in it, but there's fuel. That's all you need. Once the morning offerings are made, you start again. The midday meal is larger, more bread, more fish, sometimes beef, though rarely. The oxen are sacred and not to be wasted. The smell of boiled bones and onions fills the halls. The sandstone walls sweat with you, hot and silent. The temple bells ring in the distance. Not for you. You are not allowed into the inner sanctum. Only the high priests go there, barefoot, perfumed, whispering secrets to gods with gold faces and stone hearts. You are not permitted to gaze upon a statue of Amun, but you can smell the incense from where you stand. You think of it often, how close you are to the sacred, and yet how utterly excluded. You are the hands that feed the god, but not the voice that speaks to him. You hear rumors that some priests don't even believe in the gods, but that doesn't matter. The rituals must continue. Because the rituals keep Karnak alive, they feed the city's rhythm. And you are just one heartbeat in that rhythm. One time you drop a loaf. It lands in the ashes. You think for a moment about brushing it off and placing it back in the basket. No one would know. But then you glance over your shoulder and see the eyes of the assistant priest. He doesn't say anything, just marks something on his tablet. Later you are not punished, but you are skipped when the leftover bread is passed around. A reminder. The gods may not eat, but the priests do. And they do not like ashes in their mouths. As night approaches, you wash the dishes with clay powder and beer mash. Your hands sting. The skin has cracked near your knuckles. You dip them into the cooling water of the basin, just to stop the pulsing pain. And as the final offerings are laid at the statue's feet, and the temple echoes with hymn and scent, you find yourself wondering if the gods never ate the food. Then who were you really feeding all this time? By the second sun of the day, the high, scorching noon, you're no longer sweating from heat alone. Fatigue has a flavor. It settles behind your teeth like bitter flour and lingers in your throat. No matter how much water you drink, your hands are sticky with fruit paste and old oil, but there's no time to wash them properly. The noon offerings are more elaborate than the morning ones. This time, the gods require a feast, which means you prepare one. The kitchen shifts into a rhythm that feels sacred, even if you don't believe in sacred things. Each worker has a role, a dish, a responsibility. One man cuts onions in precise squares for a garlic stew. Another grinds dates into a thick mash with black sesame and honey. You, again, are back on bread duty, forming hundreds of small loaves that will be arranged in perfect circles, stacked like small pyramids for the god's table. You aren't allowed near the offering tables. That's the job of the Wabet, the pure ones, the priests who have bathed, shaved, fasted. You, with your scratched arms and clay-caked sandals, do not qualify. So you pass your trays to them. The food, shaped by your hands, disappears behind. Curtains carved with images of the gods. Amun with his plumed crown, Mut with her vulture headdress, and Khonsu with his youthful moonlit face. You hear the rituals through the walls, chants in old dialect, bells, the low rhythm of footfalls. On polished stone, incense smoke curls beneath the door seams, carrying with it the scent of cinnamon and myrrh, drifting over the scent of your own stale sweat. And then it's quiet again. The offerings are made. The gods, it is said, have eaten. But you know what comes next. The food returns, not for you, not yet. It goes first to the high priests and scribes. They sit on shaded porches behind the temple, picking at figs and goose thighs, sipping watered wine and speaking softly about tomorrow's omens, or yesterday's dreams. Then the rest is distributed to lesser officials and then to you. By the time you reach the scraps, the bread is hard, the goose bones gnawed, and the fruit left over is mostly bruised or mashed. Still, you eat, not out of gratitude, out of necessity. There's no other food for you. Your pay is partly in leftovers. Karnak's kitchens don't feed its gods. They feed its structure. They maintain the illusion, and you are part of that illusion. Once you asked an older worker, a man who had cooked for 3 pharaohs, why the food couldn't be offered without being prepared. Couldn't they just burn the raw grain or pour beer straight into the river, you asked? He only laughed. They could, he said, but then what would the priests eat? You were younger then. You didn't understand, now you do. As the sun lowers and the shadows begin to stretch across the courtyard, you begin preparing the evening meal. This one is smaller, more symbolic, a final appeasement before night. A few cakes, some herbs, her small jug of beer. But before that, there's cleanup. You wash the baskets, you scrape the clay ovens, you toss out the scraps unworthy even for you. You sweep, always sweeping. The sand gets everywhere, in the cracks between stones, in the curves of the kitchen hearth in your mouth. The assistant priest walks by. He does not thank you. He carries a bundle of linen with goose fat soaking through it. Someone asks if he'll be offering it to the gods again. He smirks. No, he says. This one's for the head scribe's supper. The others chuckle. You? Do not you begin to wonder, seriously, what makes the food sacred? Is it the preparation, the blessing, the hand that delivers it? Or is it simply that someone more powerful decides it so? When you leave the kitchen late that night, the air is cooler. The sun is down. The temple glows from inside like a body lit with fever. You look at it, Karnak, and wonder how many lives have passed through its corridors, how many backs have bent beneath its kitchens, how many fingers like yours have cracked open from kneading bread meant for gods who never eat, and yet it stands. Every morning it is fed again, and so are you, in your own way. But tonight, as you pull a splinter from your palm and wash your face with beer-scented water, a question forms and won't leave you. If the offering always returns to the priests, did it ever belong to the gods at all? Morning returns like it always does, too soon, too hot. You wake to the same aching wrists, the same gritty eyes, the same dread that hums in your bones before you even step outside. Your body is stiff from the cold stone floor of your workers' quarters, but you rise without thinking. Habit replaces will. You walk barefoot toward the temple kitchens again, past the same silent statues that have never once looked your way. But today is different. The high feast of Opet begins at sunset. You won't be allowed near the inner kitchens then. Not even the regular priests will. That part of the festival, the secret rites, the real offerings, the procession through the hidden rooms, belongs only to the purest, those who fast, those who chant, those who will touch the sacred bark of Amun and carry it through the city, past cheering crowds who will never know what the god is thinking, if he thinks at all. Your job is simpler, more invisible, but heavier. You are in charge of preparing the beer, not the sweet perfumed kind the nobles drink, but the thick, almost porridge-like brew made from mashed emmer, water and herbs. You stir it in great jars that reach your chest. The scent is sharp, yeasty, sour, with a hint of crushed dates and wild fermentation. You stir with a stick so big it takes both arms. You stir for hours. Your hands blister, but you keep going because today's beer will be poured before the statue of Amun himself. Not that you'll see it. You'll watch from the corner of the courtyard, behind a row of kneeling torchbearers. They will say the god is pleased, but you won't know, you never do. While the beer ferments in clay vats, you're pulled into another task, preparing the incense cakes. You mix frankincense powder with honey and press it into thick black cakes the size of a closed fist. When burned, they release a smoke meant to cleanse the air, drive away evil spirits, and wake the statues for prayer. But you've smelled the smoke. It doesn't smell divine. It smells like scorched sweetness and ash. It clings to your nostrils, your skin, your dreams. Still, the priests tell you the smoke rises to the heavens. The gods inhale it. It nourishes them. You wonder why gods need smoke. You line the cakes on a tray and carry them to the offering hall. You're allowed to leave them just inside the stone door, beneath the gaze of a giant relief of Amun, painted with ochre skin and a smile that never moves. You bow, not because you believe, because you are watched. That evening, as the sun begins to sink, the air changes. The crowd gathers outside the temple walls. Musicians tune harps and flutes. Dancers rehearse their movements barefoot in the sand. Priests in white robes light the first torches. The golden shrine of Amun is draped in embroidered linen, hidden from view but carried with reverence on a bark of cedar and bronze. You will not see it pass. You're sent to clean. Your job, during the most sacred moment of the Opet festival, is to scrub the kitchen floors with beer dregs and wet sand, to throw away broken amphorae, to scrape burned fish scales from the clay grills so they don't reek in the morning. You hear the chanting grow louder. You smell the burning incense. And as you work in silence, the thought comes again. If Amun is real, why has he never looked at you? No priest has ever asked your name. No scribe has recorded your words. No statue was carved for the men who sweep the ashes. But the bread still gets baked. The beer still gets brewed. The offerings still get carried. The gods are still fed. And somehow Karnak still stands. That night, long after the last torch has gone out and the priests sleep with full bellies, you walk alone to the edge of the courtyard. You look up at the temple columns, painted blue like the sky, and watch the stars shift between their shadows. You whisper, not a prayer, but a question. A quiet, tired question. If gods never bleed, never hunger, never toil, do they even know we exist at all? You receive no answer, only the scent of cooling coals, and the soft creak of another day beginning, somewhere just beyond your reach. The desert doesn't whisper. It doesn't call. It waits. You walk into the silence long before the sun arrives. There is no wind yet, no birds. Just the crunch of ancient sand under leather-wrapped feet and the distant flick of hooves from the donkey you leave behind you. Its breath is thick in the cool of the pre-dawn dark. You are a salt harvester. The year is somewhere in the early 12th century BCE. You live not by the fertile banks of the Nile, but far beyond, out in the Red Land, where Pharaoh's reach thins, and the world turns to dust. Here, salt is not just a seasoning. It is currency, it is offering. It is life and death, packed into sharp little crystals, scraped from the earth where ancient lakes once dried and cracked and split into glowing white plains that shimmer like glass in the midday heat. The salt field is called the mouth of the sky by those who come here, because in the hottest part of the day, the white floor reflects the heavens and blinds you, but not yet. Now the land is gray-blue and still cool. You reach the salt basin just as the horizon begins to bleed orange. You tie the donkey's reins to a buried stone. It grumbles and shakes dust from its hide. You do not speak to it, there's no need. You kneel beside a shallow pit, one of dozens dug months earlier and abandoned to dry in the sun. A faint crust of salt lines the edges. This one is ready. You break the surface. First, you use a wooden paddle to crack the thin, delicate crust, then a curved copper tool to scrape underneath, loosening the chunky white flakes from the hardened mud. They come up in layers, damp, jagged, and sharp. You drop them into a woven reed basket. Your fingers sting where the salt has entered old cuts. You work quickly. The longer the sun rises, the more dangerous the job becomes. The heat doesn't just burn skin. It boils thought, drains strength, warps vision. Your father once told you that salt has memory, that the land remembers the lakes it once held, that the crystals remember the tears of gods. You don't believe that anymore. You believe in what you carry home, what you trade for grain, what the temple cooks sprinkle on fish before pretending. It belongs to the gods. The baskets fill slowly. You take frequent breaks, not out of laziness but survival. The desert punishes rhythm. If you fall into habit, you forget where you are. And forgetting the desert means dying in it. There are others nearby, scattered across the plain. Men like you, their bodies hunched like question marks against the horizon. You don't talk much. You just nod at one another from afar, passing signals with raised hands or a single cough. By midday, the world is white. There is no up or down, no sky or earth, just a furnace of blinding salt light. Your eyes squint beneath your head wrap. You wrap a palm frond around your forehead to keep the sweat from blinding you. The salt pulls the moisture from your skin. You do not notice how thirsty you are until your tongue begins to crack. Water must be rationed. You carry it in 2 jars buried in the donkey's pack. You drink half a mouthful, no more. You swish it around your teeth like a gift and swallow like it's gold. In the far distance, you see one of the younger men stumble. He is crouched now, pressing his hands into the salt. Maybe he dropped something. Maybe he just can't breathe. You do not go to him, you cannot. If you walk across the salt fields at midday, your footprints can cook through your sandals. It has happened before. The salt burns slow, but it burns deep. The path back is not a road, it is suggestion. A narrowing of the sand where others have passed before, faintly marked by occasional cairns. Rocks stacked with care by men who knew too well what it meant to lose direction under an endless sky. Natuntisa, don't speak to the donkey. It doesn't need orders. It walks because it has walked this route for years, just as you have, and as your father did before you. The salt shifts in its baskets with every step. You hear it settle, heavy and silent, and you feel the pull on the rope tied around your waist, leading the beast by habit. Salt weighs more than its size suggests. It's the weight of water that has gone and never returned. You walk past the bones of an old cart, half buried in sand. The wood has faded to silver. The wheels are shattered. No one collects it. In this land, things left behind are simply absorbed. At a rest stop, a shaded bluff where the cliff casts just enough shadow, you stop and kneel. You sip water. Not drink, just sip. That's how survival works here. Slow, measured, quiet. From the shade, you see the basin behind you. It stretches like a wound in the desert, gleaming even under the fading light. You watch another harvester in the distance. He is lifting his baskets alone, barefoot. You wince knowing what that feels like. You once made the mistake of working barefoot. Your sandals snapped during a harvest. You thought you could finish just one more load. The salt sliced into your soles. The cuts lasted weeks. You remember how they festered, how your wife packed the wounds with herbs, how you walked like a wounded dog until the pain receded into something familiar. No one records these things. Scribes in the cities do not write about salt feet, or sun blindness, or the way the dust settles in your throat and doesn't leave for days. They write about the caravans. They tell of great sacks, of salt traveling upriver past Thebes, to be weighed in marketplaces, offered to temples, traded for wood and incense. They write of balance sheets and divine taxation, but not of the men who pulled that salt from the earth, handful by cursed handful. You remember the last time you saw a priest? He came to bless the harvest, wearing white linen that had never seen, dust. He stood on a small hill, waved a censer of incense, and mumbled words into the wind. Then he left, and you kept scraping. Now, as the light begins to fall into that long red hue that gives the red land its name, you reach the way station. It's no more than a stone platform near a dried-up wadi with a canopy stretched between 4 wooden poles. A scribe sits cross-legged behind a chipped stone table, writing on a palm leaf fan turned flat like a board. He doesn't look up when you arrive. You unload the baskets yourself. He checks the salt. Not for purity, just weight. He nods. You're paid in barley and beer tokens, not coin, not even copper, just promises. Redeemable later, when the storerooms open. If they open, you don't argue. You tie the tokens into a strip of cloth and tuck it inside your belt. It is damp with sweat. You begin your journey home. The sun is behind the hills now, but the heat lingers in your bones. The donkey walks more slowly. You match its pace. The stars begin to flicker above the flat desert sky, the only companions that do not judge. Your feet ache, your hands are cut, but there is food waiting, somewhere in a hut carved from mud brick and faith. There is a child who will ask how much. You brought. You will say enough, even if it's not true. And as the first wind of night sweeps over the plains and lifts the salt dust into little spirals of stinging air, you find yourself thinking, not of rest or reward, but of this. How? Many days have you carried the weight of the god's salt, only to find your own name dissolving in the dust. The wind rises before dawn. It pushes fine grit through the cracks in your door, slipping across the floor like a warning. You wake to the sound of sand scratching against clay. Soft, insistent, endless. The donkey brays from the small enclosure. Out back. It smells a storm before you do. There will be no salt gathering today. That isn't rest, it's delay. When a desert wind begins its tantrum, no one dares walk the salt basin. The crystals become blinding. The air a dry blade. You've seen men come back from the white fields with their lips cracked open and their eyes swollen shut. One never came back at all, and so you stay. You patch the roof. You sort your tools. You mend a basket with strips of old palm cord. You teach your daughter how to knot the weave properly. Her hands are small. Her fingers don't understand the rhythm yet. But she listens. She asks why you always smell like dust. You tell her because I work where the rain forgets to fall. She giggles. But it's not a joke. You think sometimes about what would happen if you left this place, if you walked north, until the salt gave way to wheat fields and temple gardens, if you found work as a porter or a water drawer, or even just another face on a boat crew bound for Memphis. But you don't leave. You stay because the salt is what you know. Because the tokens you carry in your belt still have some value. Because your father died doing this, and his father too. And somehow that feels like a reason. Besides, no one leaves the desert poor and returns rich. You've heard stories. Men who tried and failed, who drowned in cities far from home. So you wait for the storm to pass, you listen to it rake the walls. You smell the heat it carries, even though the sun isn't up yet. You grind a handful of roasted barley into porridge for your child and think about how much salt it took to trade for it. Later, when the sky calms and the wind dies down, you walk outside. The basin looks different now. The surface has shifted. small ridges and new cracks where the storm smoothed the flats and carved new edges. It's never quite the same. The desert has no memory, only repetition. You find one of your pits covered with a thin layer of sand. You'll have to start over. Dig again, clear again. Wait for the crust to form once more. There's no anger in you anymore. Just the long silence of someone who's run out of questions to ask. You remember a man who once tried to mark his name into the salt. He used a bone shard to carve it along the rim of a basin, thinking it would last. A week later it was gone. The wind took it, or the heat melted it, or another harvester walked over it without knowing. That man stopped harvesting a few seasons. After, you heard he moved south to work in a copper mine. Maybe that was better, maybe not. The truth is, no one cares who pulls the salt, only that someone does. You shoulder your tools, you walk the rim, you check the cracks, and before leaving, you pause. You kneel beside one pit and run your hand through the new crust. It's thin, weak. It needs time. But something strange catches your eye. A tiny fossil, a perfect shell embedded in the dried surface, curved like a sleeping ear. A remnant of the lake that once lived here, thousands of years before your bones ever formed. You touch it gently, and for a moment you feel a presence, not divine, not ghostly, just memory of a world that dried up, and of those who kept scraping at it long after the water was gone. When you return home, the donkey walks behind you again, silent. Your daughter runs to meet you. She holds up a drawing made with charcoal and broken reed. It's a man and a donkey under a giant white sun. The man is smiling. You take the drawing, say nothing, and hang it inside your door with a thorn. Tomorrow the sun will rise again, and the salt will still be waiting. But tonight, before you sleep, you sit beside the hearth and hold the charcoal picture in your hands, and you wonder if the desert forgets all names. Will this small one remember yours? The sun has barely risen, but you're already hunched over a reed mat, your knees stiff, your fingers black with soot and gum. Your name will never be remembered by the historians of the future, but you are one of the ones who wrote theirs down. You are a scribe. You work in a small records room tucked into the back of a temple complex, somewhere near the workshops and storehouses, far from the sanctuaries and processions. There's no gold here, no incense, just dust, scrolls, ink, and the persistent sound of scratching reeds. Your tools are simple. A wooden palette holds 2 cakes of pigment, black for the everyday, red for corrections, warnings, or sacred names. You chew the end of your reed pen, slightly, split it with a knife, then dip it into the ink. You do this without thought. Your body knows the rhythm. Your mind is already inside the page. You're copying lists today, not poems, not hymns, not proclamations, inventory scrolls. You transcribe the output of the linen weavers, noting how many bolts were delivered to the storehouse last moon. You document how many amphorae of beer went missing during the last temple festival. 12. Maybe more. The numbers don't lie, but the people who give them to you sometimes do. You're not supposed to question that. Just record it. The papyrus is coarse today, poorly cut. The fibers drag against your pen and catch the ink like a sponge. You slow your writing to keep it legible. A smudge would mean rewriting the entire section. The overseer walks by behind you. His footsteps are padded in the sand. He says nothing, just peers over your shoulder and clicks his tongue once. You do not look up. Looking up means stopping, and stopping means attention. And attention is dangerous. You write and write and write. By midday, your back is on fire. You lean forward and stretch your arms behind you, popping joints that haven't stopped aching since last flood season. The room is thick with heat, trapped air, baked stone, the faint scent of dried reeds and body odor. you are not alone. 3 other scribes work alongside you, all of you bent like withered date palms in the dry light of the record room. One coughs often, sick from ink dust maybe, or just from the work. You were once told that scribes were privileged, that literacy was a gift from Thoth himself, that to write was to shape reality. But shaping reality, it turns out, mostly involves counting jars and arguing about grain. Still, you believe in the ink. When you press the black strokes into papyrus and watch the characters form, it feels like power, small power maybe, but something real. Each symbol lives, each record becomes law, and every law eventually shapes someone else's life. You pause to scratch your arm. Ink has splattered near your elbow, marking you like a tattoo. You can't remember the last time your skin was clean. Outside, you hear a procession pass. Priests chanting, musicians. A feast day for some lesser god whose statue is being carried through the square. The bells clang softly. Perfume drifts through the window, but you do not leave your scroll. You keep writing. You record how many fish were distributed to the workers last week. How many sandals were issued to the builders at the quarry? How many times the linen deliveries were delayed? You are not a decision maker, but you are the one who writes the decisions down, and that too is power. Your father was not a scribe. He broke rocks by the river and died with his name on no record. You are the first in your family to hold a reed pen. Sometimes that feels like a victory, other times like a sentence. You wonder if the papyrus remembers your hands, or if, 1,000 years from now, someone will unroll one of these scrolls and read your strokes, not knowing your name, but seeing the shape of your silence. By evening, your fingers cramp. You've written over 3 meters of scroll, bound now with linen cord, tagged with a clay seal bearing the mark of your supervisor. You tie the last one gently. You place it on the stack, and before you rise to stretch, you pause and wonder if no one remembers the scribe, then who writes the scribe's name? You wake with your head still full of lines, not dreams, lines, columns of numbers, totals, names, deliveries, a single smudge of red ink that haunts you from yesterday's work, where you miswrote a god's name and had to start the scroll again from the beginning. That one small mistake cost you half a day. No one thanked you for catching it. They never do. You arrive at the records room before dawn. The others are already there. The ink has to be ground fresh each morning. Gum Arabic softened in water. Carbon from old fires scraped and mashed into a thick black syrup. You stir slowly with the back of a reed pen until it forms a usable paste. Only then can you begin. Today's task, the tax scrolls from the northern granary. You are not a tax collector, but you're the one who turns the rough tablet counts and oral reports into official record. And what you write determines what happens next. A single error could mean a village pays double or receives nothing. You know this. You remember last year, one of the newer scribes made a copying error. He wrote 300 sacks instead of 3 dozen. No one noticed until the soldiers came. They took what the scroll demanded. The village starved. That scribe does not work here anymore. So today you count carefully. You squint at sun-faded palm leaf notes handed to you by the overseer, comparing the tallies with the quota rolls. You catch an inconsistency. A family. Marked as owning 12 oxen, when you're sure they only had 7 last time. You cross-check with an older scroll. You were right. You make the correction carefully using red ink. This is not just a clerical change, it's a lifeline. You never meet these villagers, of course, but you feel a strange responsibility for them, these people whose names you copy, but will never know. Some names appear often. You recognize the patterns, Kamet, son of Nacht, who always sends in his grain on time. Tia, widow of Hui, who falls short every year but manages to send something anyway. You've never seen her face, but you know her name better than your cousins. You wonder if she knows that someone somewhere sees her struggle in the form of ink on scroll. Probably not. By midday, your reed pen splinters. You take a moment to cut a new tip, shaving it with the edge of a flint blade. The scribe next to you coughs again. You offer him your water jar. He refuses. No one wants to be seen as weak in the records room, because weakness leads to reassignment, and reassignment means fieldwork. Once, long ago, when you were still a student scribe, they took you to a quarry as part of your training. So you'll understand the lives behind the scrolls, they said. You remember the heat, the cries of the stonebreakers, the bloodied hands, and the silence of the overseer who watched everything but said nothing. That memory lives in your writing hand like a shadow. So you sit straighter. You dip your new pen in the ink and you press on. You write lists of debt and payment, of work quotas met and not met, of marriages and deaths, of stolen fish and borrowed boats. Every detail becomes permanent. Every complaint becomes scripture. Once your ink touches it, there is a stack of unfiled scrolls beside your desk waiting to be sealed. You roll them tight, tie them with linen cord, and press a wax seal with the temple mark into the knot. Not your seal, not your name. The temples always. The temples. At the end of the day, the head scribe walks in. He inspects the records. He reads the first few lines of your work aloud, nods once, then leaves without a word. That's the highest praise you'll get this week. You stretch your neck and glance toward the far shelf. On it sits a jar containing a bundle of old reed. Pens cracked and dry, no longer useful. You wonder which were yours. You wonder if anyone will ever open these scrolls again. Maybe one day a future scribe will unroll a piece you wrote, frown at the faded ink, and copy it onto a new scroll. Your work will live on, even if no one knows whose hand shaped it. You lean back, crack your fingers, and close your eyes for a moment. You picture your scrolls not as tools of bureaucracy, but as vessels of memory, holding not just records, but choices and lives and quiet moments like this one. And for the first time in a while, you let yourself ask, if every life is reduced to a line of ink, who decides what is worth writing? The next morning, the ink tastes bitter. That's how your day begins. Not with sunlight or song, but with the sharp tang of soot and gum resin as you mix the black pigment too hastily, your mind still fogged by a restless night. You dreamt of scrolls unraveling endlessly, names without faces, lists without meaning. You wipe your fingers on your kilt. It leaves a stain. You've been assigned something new today, a death register. It arrives wrapped in linen, sealed with the mark of the Necropolis Administration. The clay tag is chipped, but still legible. West Thebes, month of the first inundation, year 27 of the reign. You slice the seal with the edge of a copper chisel and unroll the papyrus slowly. The names come in columns, neat and impersonal. Deceased laborers, minor artisans, one midwife, 2 infants. Their causes of death are vague. Fever, bitten by scorpion, fell from scaffolding, unknown. You copy the names into the central archive. You use red ink for children, that's the rule, as if the color somehow grants extra reverence or serves as a warning to the gods. This one died too soon. One name gives you pause. Bakenu, age 9, killed during festival. Crush. You remember hearing the shouting that day, noise from the western embankment, when too many people pressed toward the bark of Osiris and a railing collapsed. You hadn't seen it, just heard rumors, then silence. Now it's a line on a page. Bakenu. Age 9. You hesitate with the pen, then continue writing. You don't have the authority to add anything more, just the name, just the age. Your supervisor passes behind you again. This time he stops. He looks at your copywork, nods once, and says, "Don't dwell." Then walks on. But you do dwell. Because once long ago someone said scribes never die, that their names live forever in the things they record, that to write is to conquer death. And yet here you are, writing names that will never be read again. No tombs, no statues. Just a scroll that will be buried in a clay jar and filed away, unseen, until the rats or mildew destroy it. You take a short break, walking the perimeter of the temple court. The sandstone glows pale gold in the sun, carved with images of gods and kings. You run your hand across the hieroglyphs, raised, perfect, eternal. You wonder who carved them, and if that carver's name is preserved anywhere, or if it too lived and died on an unmarked scroll. Back in the record room, you resume copying. The next scroll is for grain disputes. Two brothers arguing over inheritance. You write their names, record their property boundaries, note their complaints. It will go to the temple court next week. Their fate depends on your penmanship. You take extra care with the measurements. You double-check the boundary lines. You write slowly, because this will matter to someone, not to the gods, not to the priests, but to those brothers. You finish the scroll as the light in the room fades to amber. You place it beside the others, one more thread in the long fraying fabric of Egypt's paperwork. And as you clean your ink palette and rinse your pens, you pause again, just a moment, to look at your own handwriting. Not perfect, not famous, but present. And you think, if we only remember kings and gods, and then who remembers the hands that gave them voice? You leave the record room in silence. Your sandals trace the same path across the court, past pillars that will outlive you, into a world that only listens when it is written down. Death is not a mystery to you, not anymore. You've seen it up close, again and again, in the eyes of those you knew, in the stench that clings to linen soaked in natron, in the way a body stiffens and then softens, and then simply changes. You are not a priest, not a high embalmer from the temples of Thebes. You do not anoint nobles with imported myrrh, or guide the dead to Osiris with incantations carved in gold. You are a village embalmer, a tradesman. The people you prepare are not famous nor royal. Their tombs are not decorated with hieroglyphs. Most do not even have tombs, just shallow pits in the desert wrapped in linen, sealed with hope. And they come to you, rather, their families do, because even the poor must die properly. The body arrives in a reed boat, poled down a narrow canal by two men who've done this many times. The dead woman is wrapped in a mat, not linen, just reeds. Her son walks behind, holding a small jar of barley beer and 3 small coins wrapped in cloth. That is your payment. He bows his head when he sees you. No one ever looks you in the eye. You are necessary, but never admired. You prepare your shed for the work. It is small, shaded with palm leaves, open to the wind. There are no statues, no chanting, just the scent of natron and the quiet hum of flies. You light a bit of incense, not for ritual, but to mask the smell, and unroll a linen sheet across the stone table. The body is placed gently upon it. The family retreats. They do not wish to watch. You open the reed mat. She is old, skin-like folded. Papyrus. hands curled, mouth open slightly as if her last breath tried to leave and was caught. You speak no words, you begin. First, the cleansing. You wash her body with Nile water mixed with natron, scooped by hand from shallow pools at the edge of the basin. You scrub gently using a sponge made of rushes. The water darkens as you clean her, then comes the drying. You do not remove the organs, that's expensive. Temple embalming, for those with coin. But you do what you can. You make a small incision near the abdomen and insert linen stuffed with salt and herbs, juniper, mint and wild myrrh if you can afford it. They absorb the moisture, not perfectly, but enough. You seal the cut with pitch, a crude method, but it holds. You pack the body. In natron for 7 days. In the great cities they leave it for 70. Here time costs money. The family waits. The son waits. You don't preserve the body forever, just long enough. During those 7 days you prepare the wrappings, strips of linen boiled in resin, twisted and folded by hand. You write small symbols on some, protective, signs you learned from your grandfather, passed down not through temple schools but whispered memory. When the body is ready, you rub oil over the skin. Not sacred oil, goat fat mixed with herbs. It makes the skin shine. Then you begin to wrap. You start with the toes, always the toes, then the legs, the arms, the chest. You leave the face for last. You place 2 shards of pottery over the eyes. Not real stones, not lapis or obsidian, just clay. Still, it gives the appearance of peace. You tie the final knot behind the neck, then place the amulet. Not a golden scarab, just a bead of fired clay shaped like an ankh. You don't know if it protects, but it might. When the family returns, they bring a wooden box. It is not a coffin. Just planks tied together with rope. You place the body inside. You hand the son a small strip of papyrus with her name written in ink. Tia, daughter of Hetepi. He will place it at the head of the grave. There is no priest present. You say a line. As you help carry her to the burial pit, may the West receive you and your breath return in peace. You don't know if it's right, but it's something. The son cries softly. You stand at a distance. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of dried herbs and sun-warmed salt. You feel the sting of sweat in your eyes, not from grief, just the heat. As they cover the grave, you turn back toward your shed. Another family waits nearby, standing beside a reed mat. Another body, another life, another silence. And as you reach for a fresh linen cloth, the thought comes again. If every soul needs care in death, why do only the rich die with ceremony? By the time the second body is brought into your shed that day, the heat has grown thick and slow, pressing against your shoulders like a weight you can't shake. This man is younger than the last. He arrives, wrapped in a fishing net, the kind used for Nile perch, the rope still damp with river water. The family could not afford linen. The net will have to do. You accept it without comment. His wife carries a small pouch of salt and 2 copper beads, her only offering. You nod and gesture her to wait outside the threshold. The doorway has no true door, only a curtain of dried reeds that sway and click in the breeze. She sits silently just beyond, eyes fixed on nothing. You unwrap the net slowly. The man's body is bruised. You don't ask how. His skin still holds warmth. He hasn't been dead long. The sooner you begin, the better the result. You soak a cloth in water mixed with crushed lotus and gently wipe the dirt from his arms. It doesn't matter if the scent is lost in a few hours. Ritual is less about outcome and more about intention. There's no room for perfection here. You cut thin reeds to form splints. You place them beneath his limbs to keep the body from curling inward during the drying. You stuff his ears with wool and his mouth with linen dipped in beer foam, an old method meant to keep insects out, learned from someone who learned from someone else. There are no written guides for village embalmers, only memory and mistakes. You pack the abdomen as best you can with dried grasses, natron and ash. You burn a piece of myrrh root in a clay dish to keep flies away. The smell chokes. Your lungs a little. You ignore it. Then comes the waiting. This man, like the woman before him, must sit 7 days in the natron. You place his body inside a trough carved from an old canoe, now filled with dried salt collected from a collapsed basin west of the village. You smooth the salt around him by hand, packing it gently. You don't cover the face completely. You don't know why. Maybe you just prefer not to. During the wait, you return to other tasks. You mend linen wraps. You boil resins over a low flame and pour the thick tar into tiny amphorae for future sealings. You sharpen reed pens and write names on scraps of pottery, temporary markers for temporary graves. You do this all in silence. Even the children in the village have learned not to speak when they pass your shed. Some are afraid of you. Some think you're a kind of priest. You are neither. You are simply what is needed when death arrives, and death always arrives. After 7 days, you remove the man from the salt. His skin is drawn tight now, darkened and dry. The grasses inside, his abdomen have swelled and twisted. You remove what you can. You clean the cavity with wine vinegar. Cheap, sour, but it works. You stitch the opening closed with flax twine. You begin the wrapping. His wife brings one torn tunic and a baby blanket. That is all she has. You cut them into strips and soak them in a mixture of water, honey, and pine resin. The wrapping is thin, patchy, but you take your time. You seal the final knot with a dab of tar. No amulet, no writing, just the body, wound and silent. The wife thanks you in a whisper. She places her fingers on his forehead and mutters something you cannot hear. As she leaves with the body in a reed basket, you stare at the pool of salt still lying in the bottom of the trough. It is brown now, streaked with the fluids it has, drawn from 2 human lives. You shovel it into a jar. It will be reused. There is no waste in this work. Nothing sacred can afford to be scarce. That night, you sit beneath the half-built roof behind your shed and sip water from a pot that smells faintly of old beer. You listen to the quiet hum of the reeds in the marshes, the distant barking of dogs. You remember faintly a time when you thought this work would feel noble, sacred. But now, after years of salt and blood and linen and grief, you wonder if death ever feels anything at all. And you ask yourself, not aloud, not for anyone to hear, but only in the back of your throat, if the poor are buried without names, prayers, or songs, what is it exactly that we think we're preserving? The next burial is done in silence. Not reverent silence, just the kind that settles when everyone has run out of things to say. You stand at the edge of the pit alongside a grandfather and his grandson. The boy cannot be more than 7. He clutches a strip of cloth that used to belong to the woman they're burying. His mother. You say nothing. The body lies wrapped in patchwork linen, bound with old rope, and sealed with a smear of resin so dark it's nearly black. You perform the full ritual, washed, packed, wrapped, though you suspect she had already begun to rot before they brought her. They had waited too long, not out of neglect, but poverty. The cost of resin had risen. Salt was scarce this season. The natron traders from the Delta had stopped coming weeks ago, so you used what you had. Less than was ideal. You did your best. As the grandfather covers her with sand, you place a simple marker, a piece of fired clay with 3 signs scratched. Into it, Her name a symbol for beloved and the word for west. The west is where the dead go, or so you were taught. Later that night, you sit by your fire, the pot of boiled linen water still steaming. You soak your hands in it, trying to ease the tightness in your fingers. The salt dries them out, cracks them until they bleed. You once joked that your hands were mummifying along with the bodies. You no longer find it funny. A traveler stops at your shed that evening. He is not from the village. He carries a basket of resin and a roll of linen. He offers to trade. You barter with care, one small jar of unspoiled natron in exchange for enough wrapping to last through 3 more burials. As he turns to go, he asks what your title is. You pause. You've never been asked that before. I prepare the dead, you say. He smiles, shakes his head. You're a priest then? You shake yours. No. Just someone who does what must be done. He nods once and disappears down the path, his sandals kicking up thin clouds of dust that shimmer in the moonlight. That night, a breeze carries the scent of myrrh across the fields. Someone is burning offerings at the edge of the canal. For a moment it almost smells like the temples in the big cities, like the rituals you've never seen, but have only heard described. And yet, you wonder, if death is death, no matter the wealth behind it, then why do some bodies get tombs and others just soil? In the dark, you remember your first embalming, a child. She had drowned during the flood season. Her family could not speak for days. Her mother wailed in the marshes. You had to carry her body yourself. She was light as a bird. You remember the way her hands curled inward. You remember the name you painted on the linen, Nafret. It's faded now. Gone, probably, eaten by wind or beetles. But you remember it, and maybe that matters. Maybe memory is the final burial. You prepare your tools again the next morning. You grind more ink, cut fresh linen from the bundle you received, sharpen your reed pen. Another family is coming. They have sent word ahead. You do not ask who has died. You only ask when they will arrive. And as you sweep the floor of your shed, clearing the last grains of salt and ash into a neat pile, you think, if no one remembers the embalmer, then who? Preserves the one who preserves others. You set out before the heat. That's the rule. Always before the heat. Your feet press into the damp boards of the small reed boat as you guide it away from the riverbank. The morning air clings to your skin, not yet thick with sun, but already heavy with silence. The Nile is glass, smooth and slow, like a sleeping god. You are a courier, not for the state, not for the temples, not for the merchants in polished sandals. You, are something smaller, less official but far more necessary. You carry messages between villages, between scribes, between men who need something delivered quietly. Sometimes it's a satchel of papyrus, sometimes a folded cloth, sometimes a jar, sealed with wax and no markings at all. You do not ask questions. You do not open anything. Because couriers who ask questions don't stay couriers long. Your boat glides between papyrus reeds taller than your head. Insects hum. A heron startles and lifts away into the light. You steer using a long pole, pushing against the soft river bottom, adjusting your path with every eddy and twist of the water. Your first stop is a small way station between two irrigation canals. You carry a folded scroll for a scribe named Hetem, sealed with the wax crest of a land assessor from Memphis. You do not know what it contains, but you do know that Hetem always sweats when he receives these. You watch him today as he breaks the seal with a flint blade. He does not smile. He reads quickly, then burns the scroll in a clay bowl before nodding for you to leave. He pays you in fish, as usual. 3 dried, 1 salted. You wrap them in cloth and continue. At midday, the sun settles over the river like a weight. The surface turns gold, but you know better than to admire it. The reflection blinds. You lower your gaze. The pole in your hand is warm now. The wood has soaked up the heat. Your next delivery is to a temple outpost, but not one that shows up on maps. A lean-to beside a canal mouth, half hidden by willows. It's not large, but it's guarded. 2 men in white linen stand outside. They do not greet you. One reaches for the scroll, unmarked and bound with palm fiber. He smells it before he takes. It checks for tampering, then disappears behind the curtain of reeds. You are paid in silence. You are given a cup of water and a glance that means leave, so you do. But something tugs at you. The scroll was heavier than usual, the fiber tighter. And the man who accepted it, his hands were ink-stained, but not from scribe work, not from copying. From writing in haste. You know the difference because you've carried messages that made men disappear. You once delivered a papyrus sealed in 2 layers of wax to a noble estate. 3 days later, the estate was silent. The workers gone. No one ever spoke of it. Another time, a woman pressed a tiny folded note into your hand and begged you not to read it, only to deliver it to a field scribe outside Abydos. You did. A week later, she was taken away on charges of sorcery. No one remembered her name, and so now when you pole your way back toward home, your boat lower in the water with fish and payment, you carry something else too. Not a scroll, but knowledge, the kind that comes from pattern, from seeing the same crest appear in too many messages, from watching fear travel faster than ink, from learning which names vanish from ledgers soon after they appear on the paper you carry. And still, you do not speak, because you are a courier, a ferryman between secrets. Your name is not written down. You do not wear robes. You do not sit in judgment. You are not a scribe or priest or guard, but you are the thread. You are the current beneath the calm. As your boat drifts into the evening haze and the frogs begin their chorus in the reeds, you stare down at your hands, ink smudge from where a scroll leaked during the midday heat, and you ask yourself, if the river remembers nothing, who carries the memory of what passed through it? The next morning you receive 3 scrolls. One is marked with a temple seal from Heliopolis. Another is tied with black cord, no wax, no signature. The third is different, smaller, folded, not rolled. A scrap, really, barely more than a whisper of papyrus. It's addressed not to someone, but about someone. You recognize the name Kamesu, a grain official you delivered to once, months ago. Short man, Nervous? Like to tap his fingers against clay pots when he waited. He'd given you a basket of leeks as payment. Told you never to say you'd seen him. Now his name is on this folded note. No message, just his name and a symbol, a broken reed. You pause. In the courier world, symbols speak louder than words. A broken reed means severance, exile sometimes, sometimes worse. You place the scrolls carefully in your satchel, push the reed boat off from shore, and glide again into the slow veins of the river. You don't ask. Questions, but they rise anyway. You pass through familiar waterways. Old women scrubbing clothes at the riverbank glance up and nod. A child waves from the shade of a fig tree. The donkey tethered to a stump bleats lazily at nothing. The world moves as it always does, quiet, cyclical, timeless. But you are not the same. You've begun to notice patterns. The names that cross your hands often vanish a few weeks later. They stop receiving letters, stop paying their field taxes, stop appearing at the ferry crossings or public grain counts. You once asked a fellow courier if he'd ever heard of a man named Nebe. He looked at you strangely and said, "I thought you carried the letter that said Nebe was dead." You hadn't. You'd only carried a bundle with his name on the outside. You remember burning that bundle later on instinct. Now, as you pull your boat through the narrow throat of a canal lined with dying reeds, you wonder what kind of network you've become part of, because you don't work for a single temple or a single noble house. You carry for all of them. That's how you make a living, unattached, unnoticed, unaligned, but increasingly you feel like a thread pulled through someone else's weaving, and sometimes the thread snaps. At your second stop today, a merchant compound where a clerk waits beneath a fig arbor, you're given a jug of honey beer and a small carved seal as payment. The seal is an odd choice, too valuable, too personal. You inspect it later when you're alone. The carving is of Ma'at's feather, truth and balance, the kind of seal a mid-level judge might carry. You feel its weight in your palm and wonder, why give this to you? What did you deliver? That made this worth parting with. You put it in your satchel and do not speak of it again. That evening you find your way to a storage key near the edge of the capital district. One of the scrolls is to be delivered to a man named Sabu, an archivist who lives above the grain lofts. You climb the stairs. "They creak," he answers quickly. He's older than you expected, thin, barefoot, eyes sharp but tired. He sees the scroll, recognizes the seal, and stiffens. You don't ask. You hand it to him. But before he takes it, he stops. "You're the courier from the south, aren't you?" You nod. He looks at the scroll, then at you. You should be careful. You wait for more, but that's all he says. You turn to leave. That night, as you drift your boat into the shallow reeds and tie it for rest, you lie back against the boards and listen. To the frogs and insects sing their aimless songs. The scrolls you carried today are gone, but their meanings linger in your head. Names that vanish, symbols of judgment, and now warnings from strangers. You stare at the stars reflected in the water, and for the first time in years, you feel uncertain. You chose this life because it meant freedom, movement, simplicity. But lately it feels like you're carrying something heavier than scrolls, and you wonder, if you become the one who knows too much, how long before someone writes your name on a folded scrap of papyrus too? The next scroll you carry is the one you almost don't. It arrives without warning, handed to you by a child no older than 10, standing barefoot at the edge of a canal. His tunic is patched, his eyes are unreadable. He doesn't speak, just holds the scroll out and waits. You take it slowly, it's sealed with black wax, no mark. No name, no weight in the hand, just silence. You look up to ask the child who sent it, but he's already gone, disappearing into the thick stalks of papyrus like he was never there. You stare at the scroll for a long time, then tuck it into the fold of your robe and push off once again, the boat groaning as it meets the river's breath. The Nile does not rush. It never has. It lulls. And yet today it feels less like a path and more like a question. You deliver 2 other scrolls before addressing the final one. One goes to a ledger keeper outside Perbast, another to a priestess near a ruined granary, shrine where cats perch on crumbled walls and watch you with eyes that never blink. Each delivery is normal, familiar, but the third, the black wax scroll waits in your satchel, burning with a kind of quiet pressure. You're told to deliver it. To a man named Rekmir, no title, no location, just a name and a district. The western quarter of Men Nefer, where homes are packed tight against the city's cracked earth walls, and where no one opens their doors unless they already know your face. You walk with the scroll hidden against your ribs. You ask once quietly at a perfumer's stall if they know a man by that name. The old woman inside does not answer. She only raises one eyebrow, then closes her shutters. That's the answer. Eventually someone points. A small clay house, 1 floor, no markings. You knock. No one answers. You leave the scroll wedged under the lintel, pressed into the cracked plaster. And you leave fast. That night, the wind is sharp across the river. You pull your boat into a secluded inlet and wait out the silence. You try not to wonder what was in the scroll, but you do. Because lately, the scrolls feel more like messages between ghosts, not love letters, not business dealings, removals. You've stopped asking names unless they're written on the outside. Even then you let them pass through your hands like water, unheld, unremembered. Still, some stick. Bakenu, Hatem, Kamesu, Rekmir. You find yourself listing them aloud sometimes, just to prove they existed. You still have the feather seal hidden in the bottom of your satchel. You've thought about tossing it in the river, but some part of you holds on to it. Maybe because it feels like proof that something happened. Maybe because it's the only thing you have that isn't a scroll. You sleep lightly. A sound wakes you, soft. Paddling. You rise, heart tight, hand on the boat pole, but it's just another courier passing silently in the night. He nods once. You nod back. Neither of you speaks, because both of you know something now. The reed boats carry more than messages. They carry stories that no one dares write, fates that arrive folded in silence. Names that vanish without echo, and people like you who ferry them without question. Until the river finally asks one back. As dawn creeps over the horizon and the water turns from black to bronze, you push off again into the current. The wind lifts faintly at your back. You whisper the names one last time, not to remember, to remind. The river that they pass through. And quietly you wonder If your own scroll is ever written, will there be anyone left who knows where to deliver it? You were not born into medicine. You were born into dust, into the smell of wet clay after the floodwaters receded, into the sound of coughing mothers and children with swollen bellies and cracked feet. You learned to bind reeds before you learned to spell your name. You learned to mash herbs before you could write them down. You are a healer, not trained in temples, not guided by priests, a village doctor. And this morning, as you step outside, your mud brick hut, the air is too still, the kind of stillness that smells like rot. You know that smell. You've smelled it too many times. Not death, not yet, but its whisper. The faint, sour tension of fever moving unseen. You hear it in the breathing of animals. You see it in the black flies that hover near the water pots. You feel it in the dryness behind your eyes, in the silence of the goats, in the way your neighbors' voices falter when they greet you. They are afraid you are too, but your hands must stay steady. The first sign comes with the boy who collapses at the threshing floor. No wounds, just heat in his skin and a shaking that doesn't stop. You press your hand to his forehead. It burns like clay left too long in the kiln. You open your pouch and pull out coriander paste, crush it with beer, and rub it beneath his arms. You whisper the old chants, not because you believe they work, but because his mother does. She watches you with wide, bloodshot eyes. She has seen others die this way. You cannot say he won't. The next day, 3 more are sick. 2 children and an old man who says he hears buzzing in his ears. His fingers are turning dark. By the 4th day, it is a thing, no longer a collection of sick people, but something larger. A presence in the village. You've seen it before. It has no name. Or rather too many. Some call it the Red Wind. Some say it's punishment from the gods for a scribe's broken oath. Others say it comes when the river is too low and the fish too few. You just call it what it is. A sickness, and you try, like you always do, to slow it down. You move through homes barefoot. You sleep in the fields. You burn handfuls of cedar and wild mint in small pots to smoke out the air. You smear goose fat on cracked lips. You cut leeches from ankles swollen with fever. You wrap wet linen around boiling bodies and offer barley water when they can no longer swallow. Most do not speak. They are past speaking. You sit beside them anyway. Sometimes when the fever finally breaks and they sleep, truly sleep, you slip outside and kneel in the dirt, breathing as if it's your first time doing so all day. Other times, they die. Quietly. Often in sleep. When they do, you wash their body and rub the skin with vinegar. You pack the mouth with herbs to stop the smell, and you whisper a line from a chant your grandmother taught you. Let the wind carry you back to the cool place. You are not a priest. You are not holy. But death listens to anyone who speaks calmly. And so you speak. You sleep only when you collapse. You eat what others leave for you at the edge of the fields. A bit of old bread, a jug of sour beer, a handful of olives. You do not go home. Not really. You rest your head on a folded tunic beneath the sycamore tree beside the well, and you stare at the stars between blinks. No one says thank you, not because they are ungrateful, but because their mouths are full of fear. And still, you return each morning. Salt under your nails, sweat in your eyes. A new pouch of ground date seeds and charcoal ash tied to your hip. A new chant on your tongue. A new child burning with fever. And all the while you wonder, if death doesn't sleep, how can you afford to? The dead are beginning to outnumber the sick. You feel it first not in the bodies but in the silences that follow. Houses that once rang with morning voices are now quiet. Doors stay shut longer. The air is thick with unspoken math. How many are left? How many are fading? How many are pretending not to feel the heat behind their eyes? And you, the healer, are now the watcher of all of it. The villagers no longer meet your gaze when you enter, because they know what you bring. Not cures. Not certainty, just presence. That terrible, honest presence of someone who shows up when everyone else begins to look away. You stop counting the number of patients. You start counting the number of wrapped bundles placed near the well at dusk. The bodies are taken into the marshes quietly, wrapped in mats and smeared with whatever herbs you have left. You no longer bother with the full rites. There's no time. You begin mixing new pastes out of desperation. Ash from the fig tree burned with dried locusts, goose grease boiled with white bark, even honey, precious, rare, saved only for weddings and newborns. You mix it with crushed garlic and spread it on the lips of those who won't wake. You say it might coax their breath back. You lie, but sometimes lying is all you can offer. You open an old basket of dried medicines, saved from your grandfather. Inside is a scrap of papyrus so fragile it crumbles at the edges, a list of chants. Remedies, one says, for the fever that eats the chest, bind with nightshade, whisper the name of the moon, and turn the sick away from the sunrise. You try it, nothing happens, but you do it again the next day. You are running out of herbs. You are running out of lies. The priest from the next village does not come anymore. He stopped visiting after the second week. He had said the gods would protect the faithful. Then his sister fell ill. Now his door is closed, so the people come to you not just for medicine, but for guidance. They ask, should we leave? You shake your head. There's nowhere to go. The sickness moves with breath, with touch, with the river wind. Running from it is like running from the air. You hear rumors of caravans closing their gates, markets turning people away, boats refusing to dock. The larger towns have gone quiet. Not from peace, but from the weight of too many funerals and too few hands left to dig the graves. One night, you are called to a house where the child is already gone. The mother is silent. She points at the small mat in the corner where the child had slept. She says only, make it look like sleep. You do. You wrap the child in soft linen soaked in rose water. Fold the arms gently and press a dried lotus blossom into the small hands. You whisper the line again. Let the wind carry you back to the cool place. You don't know if the gods are listening anymore, but you are, always listening, always answering the door even when no one knocks. You return to your sleeping place beside the well that night. Your own cough has begun, a dry sound at the bottom of your throat that makes you pause mid-sentence sometimes. You mix a paste of honey and charcoal for yourself. You drink slowly, you wait. The stars above you flicker like ash in a slow burning. Fire! You close your eyes. And in that thin moment, you allow yourself to think, if the healer begins to fade, who will make them look like they're sleeping? You lose your voice before you lose your strength. It begins with a rasp in the morning, dry and scratchy, like papyrus being torn. You cough behind closed doors. You chew on tamarisk root and drink beer warmed with honey and garlic. It helps. A little. You tell no one, because there is no one left to take your place. The sickness is slowing now, but only because there are fewer to catch it. Those who survive do so quietly. They do not celebrate. They carry their losses around their waists like sashes of mourning. The air in the village has changed. People speak only in essentials, a nod, a gesture, a single word when needed. Silence does more than fear ever could. You spend your days tending to the survivors, setting broken bones that went neglected, treating infections that crept in during the chaos, comforting those who lost everyone. One woman, Nanette, whose husband and daughters were all taken, sits by the canal each morning speaking to no one. You sit with her once. She does not move. You place a warm stone in her hands, a trick you learned from your grandmother. Heat reminds the body it is still alive. She doesn't thank you, but she squeezes the stone. You count that as enough. You burn herbs now more out of ritual than medicine. The smell of ash and mint has become your shadow. You dream in smoke. You taste it even when you chew nothing. One evening, an old man brings you a papyrus scroll. It's thin, half-burned at the edges, wrapped in palm fiber. He says he found it tucked inside a sealed jar at the edge of the marsh. From the temple, he whispers, from before. You unroll it slowly. It is a prayer for the dead, written in a forgotten dialect, half philosophy, half poem. You do not read it aloud. You let your fingers trace the ink, feel the brush strokes of another long-dead hand. And for the first time, you write something. Yourself. Not a remedy. Not a tally of the sick, just names. You take a scrap of linen and dip a reed in the dark resin mixture you use to seal wounds. You begin to write Menku, Tia, Kai, Bakenu, Nenet's daughters, the fisherman's wife, the boy from the threshing floor, the child with the fever who saw stars before slipping away. You do not stop until the cloth is full. You hang it in the rafters of your shed with a thorn. The names flutter in the warm air. They move like breath. You fall ill properly 3 nights. Later, no fever, just exhaustion that won't lift. A buzzing in your head. Your legs tremble when you stand. You begin to forget the order of things, what herbs come, before which chants are spoken at which moment. So you prepare yourself. You boil your own cloths. You set aside clean water. You stack reeds by your bedside. You bind a small lotus blossom in linen and place it in a jar by the mat, just in case. But you do not stop working. You dress wounds with shaking hands. You whisper over the dying with a cracking voice. You carry your satchel of herbs even when the weight pulls at your spine, because you know the truth. If you stop, no one else will start again. And when the final patient of the season is brought to your shed, an infant too small to know fear, you hold her against your chest and feel her pulse, weak but steady. You place a drop of garlic oil on her tongue. She squirms. She breathes. She lives. And when her mother returns the next morning and sees the child sleeping, not stiff, not still, just sleeping, she falls to her knees and weeps into your lap. You place a hand on her back and let her cry. And that night, as you lay down on your mat, chest tight, limbs buzzing with fatigue, you stare at the cloth of names hanging above you and whisper, "If I am never remembered, let this list remember me." You close your eyes, and for the first time in many weeks you sleep, not from collapse, but from rest. You carry no weapons, but every door you knock on opens with fear. You are not a soldier, not a priest, not a thief. You are something worse, a census taker. You walk from village to village with a satchel full of papyrus rolls, an ink pot tied to your belt, and a tally stick that feels heavier than it should, not because of the wood, but because of the names it holds. names that mean taxes, names that mean labor, names that could vanish if written poorly. The year is somewhere around 1800 BCE, Middle Kingdom, Egypt. The Nile floods are weaker this season. The harvests are late, which means people are afraid, and you are not welcome, but you are necessary. You enter the first village just after midday, when the sun has driven everyone indoors and the dust clings low to the ground like fog. You don't announce yourself. You just wait in the center of the square, holding your reed pen, watching. Eventually the headman appears. He does not bow. He doesn't need to. Your presence is enough. You tell him what you need: names, ages, animals, plots of land, stores of grain, numbers of loaves baked in the last month. He nods once, then vanishes. You wait. While you do, a child peeks from behind a wall. She stares at your satchel like it's a knife, because she knows, everyone does, what you write becomes law. One extra name, one wrong count, and the village could be called. To send more men for corvée labor, forced construction crews digging canals or hauling stones for temple pylons. Or worse, temple dues. A wrong count of cattle could mean a heavier tax. A miswritten name could disappear someone. You once made that mistake, not on purpose. A woman named Hainut. You forgot the line that marked her as widowed. Without that mark, she owed more barley. They came and took her son in place of the debt. You've never forgotten her name since. The headman returns with a rough slate marked in chalk. It's a pre-tally. You compare it against last year's numbers. 3 fewer. Goats, 4 more children. A new baby unnamed, a man marked missing. You write each detail slowly, carefully, scraping your pen across the papyrus and blowing gently on the ink to dry it. The headman watches. His eyes never leave your hands. You leave no room for error, because here, error is punishment. You finish. The list. Seal it with a cord dipped in red ink. Press the village's clay stamp into the knot. The headman breathes again. But no one thanks you, because no one thanks the river for flooding. They just wait to see if it will ruin them. You walk. On next village, next square, next face staring at you with silent hatred. The days stretch long beneath the sun. Your robe sticks to your skin. Your hands cramp, but still you walk, still you write. You dream in numbers now. How many sacks of wheat per household? How many donkeys? How many pots of beer were brewed last month? How many mistakes you've made? You camp beneath the sycamores, away from the homes. You don't light a fire. You eat dried figs and old barley bread. You sip warm beer from a jar sealed with beeswax. You look up at the stars. You wonder if the gods keep lists like you do, if they write names down when someone is born, and then again, quietly, when someone disappears. You wonder how many names are written in error, how many never get erased, and you think, if your pen decides who lives and who is taken, is that still just a job? By the 3rd week, your ink is running low. You chew the end of a broken reed pen and suck the last of the black dye from a crusted shell. Dad tastes like bitter ash, like old fire, like something that shouldn't be in your mouth, but you do it anyway. There is no fresh ink until you reach the district office, and that is still 3 villages away. You dip carefully, you press slowly. You write in short strokes. One mistake now and the page bleeds. You arrive at a small hamlet by the river bend, barely 30 homes. Goats, 1 cow, a single boat tethered to a gnarled tree by fraying rope. They greet you with something close to civility. An old man brings a bench. A girl offers stale beer. You thank them, nodding once, and open your scrolls. You begin asking questions. How many in this house? Who owns this land? Has the baby been named? Are the older sons working or dead? The questions are always the same. The answers are never easy. One woman breaks down crying before she finishes her list. Her husband, vanished last planting season, drafted to carry stone, never returned. There is no record of his death. You must write absent. That means she still owes. You try to explain that it isn't personal, but the words turn to clay in your mouth. You know what absent really means. It means her barley will be taken. Her boy might be taken next. It means, Tet, you hesitate, your hand hovers over the page. Then you write the word anyway, because if you don't, someone will come asking why, and then you'll be the one answering. That night, as you sit near the water's edge, watching frogs ripple through the reeds, you think of the scrolls in your satchel. Each one is sealed with wax and cord. Each one carries decisions that echo louder than your footsteps. You remember Hanut again, and now this woman too. You've begun to dream of them, faces that do not speak, but stare. Lips stitched shut with tally cords, eyes painted black like temple statues. They do not accuse you, they just watch. You wake cold, even in the warm air. You don't tell anyone about the dreams. The next morning, a boy no older than 12 stands in your path with a clay pot and asks if his goat needs to be counted. You nod gently. He smiles, proud to be part of something official. You kneel beside him and ask its name. He says, "She's called Whisper." You write it on the back of your ledger. In the margin where no one checks, it's not required, it won't be read. But something about it steadies your hand. Later, as you tally the village's granaries, you find a discrepancy. The pre-tally says, there should be 32 baskets of barley. There are only 29. You can lie, you've done it before, just a little. A mark erased, a digit shifted, but not today. Today you write the truth, and when the headman asks what you'll report, you hand him the scroll, already sealed. He nods, slowly. He does not thank you. You do not expect it. On the boat, ferrying you. To the next bank, the ferryman asks what it is you carry. You hesitate, then say, names. He grunts. Useful things, names. You nod. But you're not sure anymore, because in the end the names don't belong to you. They belong to the system that swallows them. And as you step off the boat, your sandals sinking slightly into the riverbank. Mud, you think. If a name can be erased with a single brushstroke, what protects the person behind it? Your satchel is full now. Not with supplies, but with sealed records. Dozens of scrolls neatly tied and marked with village signs, grain weights, population counts, and the simple, terrifying math of who exists and what they owe. You walk slower than before. Not from fatigue, though it drapes your shoulders like wet cloth, but from weight. The weight of ink that holds lives. You arrive at the final village, just before the sun begins its long fall behind the western hills. The light turns to honey. Everything looks softer, almost kind. It isn't. This is the village that doesn't appear on the last year's records. You flip through your scrolls. You scan the older ledgers. No mark, no name, no listing. It shouldn't exist, and yet it does. That means one of two things: either it was missed or it was erased. Both are dangerous. You are greeted by a woman in her 40s with arms like corded rope and a face that has weathered many seasons of work. She knows who you are. She offers no beer, no stool, only a short nod and the word inside. You follow. They bring you numbers, handwritten, clear, as if they were prepared. You're given counts of cattle, loaves baked per week, workers absent, births. Everything is there, too perfect. You begin to write, but part of you watches. listens. This village and is too quiet. There are no children visible, no shouting, no laughter. No goats bleating in the heat, no dogs chasing carts, just stillness. You check their grain record. It is modest but sufficient. You inspect the storage, sealed jars, marked baskets. You glance at the ledgers again, and there it is, a missing name. One of the workers listed for the canal labor doesn't appear in the household count, you ask. The C. Woman pauses, then shrugs. Left, she says, but her voice holds nothing behind it. You write absent, then stop. You stare at the ink as it pools slightly on the page. You scratch it out, then write unknown. It's small, but you know the difference. The first can be taxed, tracked, punished. The second disappears. Before you leave, you're offered a jar of water. Not payment, just politeness. You sip once. It tastes normal, but something in your stomach turns anyway. When you walk away from the village, your back feels exposed. You do not look behind you. The next day, you arrive at the district office, a cluster of mud brick buildings in the shadow of a larger temple, with scribes seated beneath an awning of reeds. You turn in your scrolls one by one. They weigh them. They nod. They ask no questions. They never do. You are handed a payment token, a slip of dyed cloth, and a bar of soap. Your duty is considered complete. You step away, satchel empty, but your mind is not. You think of the child with the goat named Whisper, the woman who begged you to change her husband's status from absent to dead, the village that did not exist until it did, and the man who was unknown. That word will ripple. Someone will notice, and you wonder what they will do with the ripple. As you walk along the canal path toward home, the reeds sway gently. The sky burns into a soft violet. Frogs croak. The water reflects nothing. And you ask yourself, not for the first time, if the system never forgets. Why does it keep erasing people anyway? There is no flood this year, not a weak one, not a late one, none at all. The river came close, kissed the edges of the fields, and then fell back, as if it changed its mind, as if it remembered something, and retreated into silence. You are the wife of a farmer. That should mean something in the lush, fertile world of the Nile Valley, land of barley and emmer, of lotus blossoms and mud brick homes soaked in warm light. But without the flood, the soil cracks, and your title means nothing. Your husband hasn't spoken much since the third moon passed and the river stayed low. His hands, once thick with calluses and silt, now tremble when he holds a sickle. There is nothing left to cut. You wake before him each day, pressing your palms into the woven mat to stand slowly, careful not to make the boards creak. The children sleep beside you. One has begun coughing, the other wets the mat each night. You clean the linens in secret. You have one jar of grain left, hidden beneath the floor. He doesn't know, because he would trade it. And you will need. If the taxmen are coming, they always do, whether the flood fails or not. They don't carry weapons, they don't need to. They bring scrolls and tally sticks, and the power of the state behind their shadows. They count your goats, your jars, your breaths, and then they tell you what you owe. You've lived through taxes before. But not like this, because now you have nothing, and nothing is not an acceptable answer. Your neighbor, Sia, had only one goat left. She offered it. They said it was diseased. They took her roof tiles instead. Now she sleeps under a palm basket. You grind acacia pods into a kind of paste, mixing them with old oil. It tastes bitter, but it feeds the children. You chew first, spit it out, then feed it to them softened. This is what survival looks like now, part deception, part ritual. Your husband tries to dig a trench toward the canal, but the canal is dry. Still he digs, because digging is work, and work feels like defiance. You mend his tunic in the evenings with reeds, not thread. You pray not to the gods because they've been silent too, but to the wind, to the ghosts, to the sun, to anything that might answer. The day the tax collector arrives, he comes with a scribe. Of course he does. The scribe is younger than you expected, barefoot, skin darkened by days in the field, but robes still clean. He doesn't look you in the eye. He speaks only to your husband. How many bundles? Your husband does not answer. He only stares at the earth. The scribe looks at you. He knows you are the one who will speak. So you do. You lie. You say you had 8 bundles, that 4 were taken by birds, 2 by mold. 1 was gifted to the temple. You only have 1 left. You offer it. The scribe nods, but the taxman shakes his head. No, he says. Are you owe 3? You say nothing. The scribe writes it down. Your husband stands. He offers the hoe, his last tool, the one he used to dig the trench. They consider it, then accept. You wonder if that hurts him more than the grain. The next morning, he is gone, not dead, just gone. He walks into the field and doesn't come back. You search for a while, then stop, because there are children, because there is a mat to patch, because there is a single jar of grain hidden beneath the floor. You do not tell anyone, not even your neighbor, especially not the taxmen. That night, as you light the last bit of beeswax for warmth, you stare into the flame and ask yourself, without moving your lips, if the gods will not feed you and the river will not rise and your husband cannot stay, then who exactly is supposed to protect a farmer's wife? The tally sticks come before the officials. You see them laid out in the scribe's hands, thin slivers of palm wood carved with lines and notches. Each mark a person, a goat, a jar, a debt. Each line heavier than a blade. They do not shout. They do not threaten. They simply count. And their counting is what brings the suffering. 3 more homes are taxed this week. 2 of them offer old tools, broken baskets, jars of beer so sour they've begun to rot from within. The taxmen take them anyway, then demand more. Your neighbor Sia's daughter is taken for service. Temporary labor, they say. But everyone knows that means months away. Maybe years. Maybe forever. You watch as Sia braids her daughter's hair, tying the end with a bit of dyed cloth, once red, now sun-faded. They do not speak. Sia only holds her daughter's hand until the collector says it's time. You do not cry for her, you only swallow harder. That night you walk along the canal, still empty. A few frogs cling to the mud in places. You watch one jump, then stop. You wish briefly to be as light as that frog, uncounted, unowned, free to leap away from the list of things that must be given. But you are not. You are a wife, and now the only adult in your household, which means they will come again, and when they do, they will count you. The scribe returns the next morning, alone this time, no collector. He says it's just a check. He opens his ledger and nods toward your house. Still 2 children? You nod. Still 1 jar of grain? You hesitate, then lie again. No, it's empty. He stares at you. He knows. You know he knows. But he only nods and writes it down. then closes the scroll and walks away. You don't trust his mercy. You begin to sleep with the jar wrapped in cloth and tucked beneath your sleeping mat. You place stones above it, so its weight is not noticed if someone walks nearby. You feed the children with water and wild greens, ground acacia, bits of charred bark. They ask about their father. You say he is on a journey. They nod. Children are good at belief when there is nothing else to hold. At night you braid your daughter's hair with bits of grass, like Sia did. Not because you expect the taxmen to take her, but because you know they might. So you prepare. You begin keeping your own ledger, not with ink, not with scrolls, with memory, every injustice, every jar, every name. Sia's daughter, the goats taken from your neighbor. Your own lie, repeated in silence. One night the scribe returns again, quiet, nervous. He doesn't ask about the grain. He doesn't ask at all. Instead, he kneels in your doorway, looks at the ground and says, "They'll be coming to collect labor next week. Adult women too." Then he stands and leaves. You do not speak, you do not eat that night, you wait for morning. And when the sun breaks over the fields, you gather the children, wrap the jar in cloth, and bury it deep beneath the sycamore tree near the canal. Not to hide it from the officials, but to preserve something, anything for the future, even if you are taken, even if the children are left alone. You whisper to them, "This is for when the river returns." They nod, though they don't understand. And as you walk back to the house barefoot, hollowed out by days of hunger and the weight of pretending, you wonder if survival means being forgotten by the system. Are you willing to become invisible, to stay alive? They came before dawn, 3 of them, 1 collector, 2 guards, not armed, but that doesn't matter. The threat is never the weapon, it's the scroll, the list, the names already decided. You hear them outside before you see them, the sound of sandals on dry ground, the hush of breath held by neighbors behind. Closed doors. No one interferes, they never do. You step outside before they knock. The collector nods, he's done this many times. He does not like it, but he does not stop doing it either. The household is in arrears, he says. You don't ask how much, you say nothing. He looks past you, into the house, where the children are sitting quietly, staring at the wall. You say, "Not them." He pauses, then, "1 adult, for service." It isn't a question. You nod. You've already prepared. You've braided your hair. You've tied your sandals. You've wrapped your last intact linen around your waist, like armor. You kiss your daughter's forehead, press a smooth stone into your son's palm and whisper, "Remember the tree, the sycamore, the jar, the secret future." You do not look back as you walk away. They do not bind you. There is no ceremony, no farewell. You join the other women outside the village, already gathered like dry stalks in the wind. No one speaks. A few children cry. One woman sings softly to herself, a song you recognize but cannot place. The journey is long. You pass fields that were once green, now dust, wells that echo when you drop a stone in, broken tools left in the sun. You pass statues half buried in sand, their faces eroded but still looking down on you. At night you sleep on mats in a granary turned into a barracks. You're told your labor will be counted, just like grain. You will carry baskets, stir pots, clean the floors of places meant to honor gods you haven't seen in years. You work with your head down. Your feet blister. Your back aches, but you do not break, because every